Well, if you can ignore my messy sewing room and my stuffy nose, I'm going to try to make a video on how I make marble bags. I make them from the sleeves that I cut off from the t-shirts when I make t-shirt yarn. So here is a sleeve, and it's about the right size for a marble bag. This looks like a men's small t-shirt. And that shape and size is just about right. Here's a t-shirt sleeve, and I love this blue color, but I don't know if you can see the underarm of this sleeve got quite a bit of wear, and it is stained. So I can't use that for a marble bag. Here's a beautiful gray color. Now it is marbled. You can kind of see it maybe darker down here and lighter up here. The entire t-shirt is a marbled gray, but in a marble bag, I'm afraid that might look like a stain since you don't get the big picture. So I won't use this one in a marble bag. There's nothing wrong with this one as far as stain. It might be too small for a marble bag. I'll just have to check and see. Some are just clearly too large for a marble bag. This would be a great bag to make a little girl's purse, or it could be a marble bag, so to speak, but just contain Hot Wheels cars or Legos or something else. But I think of a marble bag as perhaps small enough to slip into a boy's pocket. And so this would be pretty big, and the marbles would be just right down here. So to slip into a boy's pocket, I think maybe this one is too big. So I'm going to make this one into a marble bag. Now, you notice most sleeves will have this odd angle because of the cut of the t-shirt. That doesn't bother me for a marble bag. In fact, I kind of like it because then when it gathers up, it's got a deeper pocket for those marbles to settle into. So I don't adjust the shape of these sleeves when I make a marble bag. I turn it inside out, and when I go to the sewing machine, I'm going to stitch this hem at about 1/4 of an inch, and then I'm going to zigzag it also. So I'll do that now. Now my thread matches very well, so you may not be able to see it, but I have stitched this at just about 1/4 of an inch in a straight stitch, and then I zigzagged that hem just to give it more stability. Remember, you're not necessarily sending these to people that can mend it if it gets a little hole. I always make sure and trim off any threads. You may be sending it to someone that doesn't have access to a pair of scissors to do something as simple as trim a stray thread. So take extra care when you're making these marble bags or anything for Operation Christmas Child. So now I totally have a bag. If I turn it right side out, I'll press this so it stays nice, but it's a nice size bag. So we're going to work on this drawstring. I'm going to turn it back inside out, and I take the side that has the seam, and I want to cut that seam out about 1.5 inches down. I'm going to do my best to show you. I actually want the seam cut out of this part that I'm doing. So if you can see, I have left the seam in for the majority of the bag. But in this top 1 to 1.5 inches, I have cut the seam out. I don't like that bulk. I also need to open up this casing, and that's another reason to cut where the seam is, but I actually cut the seam out. I'm going to go over and just stretch that out so I can see where the other side is. And since I do a double drawstring, I slit this other side about the same length. I just try to match it. So I have just cut into it, and it's still, on a whole piece of fabric. There's no seam there, but I've just cut into it about 1.5 inches down. So now I have 1.5 inches down on both sides. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come back on my sewing machine. I'm going to try to show this to you, and gray was probably not the best thing to pick because I'm using gray thread, so you won't be able to see. But if you can see where these threads are that make the seam that comes across, I want to stitch just above those because I don't want those to unravel while you use the bag. So I'm going to stitch a seam just at the top of where those threads are and stitch down, tapering into this seam. And I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. I actually did change thread color so you could see better. I started just in that line of stitching, just at the top of it, because I want to catch those threads so they don't unravel. You notice I didn't pull the edges together. This is uneven. I just laid it so it laid nice and flat, and I stitched and joined, just kind of swerved down to join into that original seam. And on the other side, I did the same thing. Of course, there's not an original seam, so I started above this stitching to catch that stitching across, and then I just kind of arced back into the fold area. Now I'm going to go back and zigzag this so it stays. Okay, it's hard to tell, but I have zigzagged. I went back to gray thread in that same area. So I started just above this stitching and zigzagged that seam. So it's not going to come out with tension and pressure and use. The very top of the sleeve hem is still open on both sides, and that's where we're going to put the drawstring. Now I used the 1/8 inch ribbon at Walmart because this area gets so narrow. I don't know that anything else would really fit well. So what I do is I take a tapestry needle. It's dull on one end. It's a yarn needle, tapestry needle. They come in different sizes. And I thread the ribbon through the eye, and I go in one end all the way through and back out the other side of that same end. Let's watch. Come all the way out one side, and then just go right back in that other casing. And pull it out at the place where you started. So I make sure that I then stretch this out because I don't want it to be too short. And when I see how much I have left here, whoop, I need to pull it all the way out. Okay, so I stretch this out. And I look and see how much I have here. And this is actually quite a bit extra. So I'm going to pull on the ribbon spool a little bit just to make that shorter. And it's not hard to get it longer or shorter. Just make sure you don't pull it out. Okay, so this is maybe 3 inches. And I'm going to go ahead and trim the other side to approximately match it. Now, when you tie a knot, make sure this is stretched out. If you tie a knot and this is not fully stretched out, you won't be able to stretch it out afterwards. So I make sure this is fully extended, and then I tie a knot. I just use an overhand knot. If you have better knots, you go ahead and use them. So I have a knot here, and that's as far as I can now stretch this bag. That's why you want it stretched out when you tie the knot. So I've just tied a single hand knot. I'm not finished here yet. What I'm going to do now is take my ribbon and thread it through my needle, and I'm going to start on this end of the bag and go all the way around just like I just did. So I'm going to go back into that casing that already has one ribbon in it, but making sure that I start from the other side of the bag. When I come out, I just go right back in. Try not to get tangled in that ribbon that's already there. I go right back in that other casing. And I have done the same exact thing from the other side of the bag. Now I'm going to measure it so that the strings are about the same length as this one and tie my knot. Functionally, your bag is finished. If I pull on the 2 ribbons, it strings to the middle. It will not fully close tight because of the thickness of this, but it closes functionally. But the marbles are not going to come out of there. So stretch it back out, pull it. To finish it off, I just tie a couple more knots right over the top of that original knot. And then I take a bead. I got these from Hobby Lobby. There's baseballs, there are soccer balls, and that's what I use the most of. And then there are basketballs that appear similar to rugby balls. And I just go ahead and thread that bead where the knots are. And then I use a super glue. And I just dribble a drop into that bead hole where the ribbon is and hold it for a second for it to grip. Now I take everything that I make and I put it through prototype testing. So these bags have been used for another project for a little over a month, and the beads have not come off. So I think that works out pretty good.